This is going to be a good one, guys. Today I'm going to share with you my complete workflow in editing a waterfall I recently shot on the way to Milford Sound in New Zealand. It was rainy, it was gross, but I braved the elements to capture 3 bracketed exposures that we're going to bring together and then polish that merged HDR file in Luminar Neo. Let's get into it. So here we have our 3 exposures, beautiful, stunning waterfall. This is my base exposure here, very dark in the shadows, so I captured this exposure to allow me access to that information there as well. However, you can see that we're getting far too overexposed in the water, lost all detail there, and that's why I've captured this darker exposure as well. In a worst case scenario, we could pull out all the detail we want from this base exposure. We can also use just a single image with the HDR merge tool. You know, if I quickly jump into Enhance AI and we just crank that amount all the way up and just crank that all the way to the max, you can see already we've got a fantastically usable image there. So why do we even need this tutorial from me? Well, we're going to push things a little bit further. But if you're new to photo editing and the plethora of tools that we have available to us just intimidates you a little bit, then I would strongly recommend just grab that Accent AI slider, crank it up, and just see what Luminar Neo can do for you with that one slider. It's a really powerful tool. But using that tool certainly shows us that the information in the shadows and highlights is actually there. However, I think we're going to get a better result if we utilize the HDR merge tool. What I'm going to do is just select these 3 photos, drag them in. So you can see we've got a base exposure, an exposure value that is -2 stops below and +2 stops above. So we've got a 4-stop range right here. I'm going to open my options here. I was shooting on a tripod, but it was from a bridge, so there may be a little bit of movement, so it'd be a good idea to turn on auto alignment. I always like to put on chromatic aberration reduction. And obviously there's going to be a little bit of movement in the water in the different frames. And so ghost reduction is going to allow me to select one of those photos that Luminar Neo's HDR merge will use. And I think probably the mid exposure is the best option to go for. And the amount of deghosting, we can choose low, medium, high, or highest. I'm going to go for medium, and we'll just go for that. Click merge, and now it's over to Luminar Neo to bring those 3 exposures together into one HDR file for us. So now we've got a merged HDR TIFF file. So if we look at the level of detail in the water here, and all the detail and interest that's been brought into the rocks, the leaves, I'm pretty happy with all of that, but I really don't like what it's done to the water in the foreground here. And I also feel like the addition of the extra texture has kind of destroyed the ethereal, dreamlike quality that we had going on with the original file. But that's okay. What we're going to do is go back to the original photo. I'm just going to come to adjustments and make sure I revert to the original. And we're going to use layers to create a hybrid approach. But the first thing we want to do is actually process this photo so it's looking pretty good. I mean, the Enhance AI, that did a great job, but I like to have a little more control. So I'm just going to work with this inside of the Develop Raw tool. I'm going to go for a camera neutral profile just to expand my dynamic range slightly. And I certainly feel like we'll benefit from dropping the highlights and also boosting up those shadows. I don't want to take it too far because I still want to keep a nice bit of contrast in this file. And as you guys know, if you follow my channel, I don't actually recommend shifting the white and the black points to expand our histogram here, because that actually bunches the data at either end. What I prefer is a more linear distribution while we're still pushing the white and black points. So what do I mean by that? I'm going to press J on my keyboard so that we can see highlight warnings. Currently there aren't any. If I push the whites very high and the blacks all the way down, you can now see exactly what I mean by those highlight warnings. So I'll just double click those to reset them. A better way to do this is to actually just grab the top point of the curve, and you can see I'm just starting to shift that over until I see those little red dots appearing there. That's saying I have a pure white point, and now I'm going to do the same by moving the black point over to say, okay, I've now got pure black points. That's just a little bit too far. Okay, we've now got a fully expanded histogram, and that's looking pretty good. I can now press J on my keyboard again just to get rid of those warnings. I'm pretty happy with the color balance, so I don't feel that I need to mess around with this too much, but I might just give it a little shift just to see what my options are. And the same with the tint as well. What if we push that more towards the greens, push more magenta in, just assessing what our photo looks like if we take it in different directions. And although I wouldn't want to push this all towards the greens because it's getting discolored, I look at these areas of foliage and it starts to give me an idea of what that might look like if I really enhanced all the greens where the trees and the bush is. So that's something to bear in mind for later on in the processing. I also want to make sure that we have nice vibrant colors to work with, and the place I'm going to do that is when we're doing our initial develop raw edit. You don't want to be doing your color enhancements later with the color tool. Ideally, you want to be making those changes while you're still working on the raw file. So it's at this point that I'm just going to boost up my colors. I would sooner err on the side of oversaturation at this point because I can always control it later. And in terms of sharpness, I usually like to apply at least an initial pass of sharpening during this develop raw phase. I usually find somewhere around 50 is pretty good, but this is looking a little bit soft because of the movement in the leaves, so I'm going to go a little bit higher and also play with the radius. And in this case, yeah, I feel like actually pushing the radius up is beneficial for this shot. There isn't really too much noise in this file because this was shot at ISO 64. However, just to make sure we've got a nice clean file, I am just going to bring up the luminosity noise reduction a little bit just to soften everything off. I don't know, somewhere around 15, 16, that's good. Okay, let's have a quick look where we came from and where we've got to. So here's our before and here's our after. Before and after, and as I compare that before and after, I feel that I may have just pushed this a little bit far towards the greeny blue side of the spectrum, so I'm just going to raise that back up. Okay, so that's our starting point for the base photo. That's the raw edit completed. Now we're going to combine that with our HDR merged photo that we created before, and we're going to steal the best bits from each photo. We'll leave this as our base, put the HDR merge on top, and then just use a mask to reveal the HDR merge version where we want it. So let's do that. So to add a new layer, we come to the left-hand side and the plus icon here, we click that. And unless you change its location, you'll find the HDR merge folder inside your pictures folder on your operating system. So here we go. Here's the very crunchy HDR version. I just need to now click it. Now it's been loaded into the library. And now it's loaded over our original with 50% opacity, which you can see over here. So I can grab that slider and drop that down, and we see the version that we just processed before. And now if I grab the opacity slider and push that all the way up, we reveal 100% of the HDR version. And another way to do a comparison is to come over and right click on the thumbnail of the layer itself and just choose hide layer, show layer, hide layer, show layer. And as you're doing that, it's a good idea just to review the photo and see what elements you're liking. To be honest, if I apply any of this layer at 100%, I feel like it's going to be too much. And so I'm just going to bring the base down to, I don't know, around 60, 65. That's fine. And now I'm going to use my masking just to paint this effect in only where I want it. That's the approach I'd normally take, where I'd build the effect up. However, another option that we have is to actually erase the effect. So we can leave this layer visible at that 60, 65%, whatever that was set to, and we can actually then erase it. So what I prefer to do rather than working at 100% strength is just to drop that down somewhere between 30 and 50. Let's go a little bit lower. The lower you drop the strength, the more you're able to control the mask with a little bit more refinement. So each time I click and I make a pass, I'm removing the layer, the HDR layer, by 30% in that area. But one area I want to remove it from completely is down the bottom here. So I've put the strength to 100 and I'll just click and paint over the water. And let's just hide that layer so that we can see where we came from. And now let's show the layer. And you can see that we've introduced just a little bit more crispness, a little bit more detail through here. Now, I may not end up with it looking as crisp and crunchy like this, but I love the option that I've got all of that detail now visible in the rocks, in the water itself. It gives me a really great foundation to complete my edit from. Now, a lot of people think that layers are only useful when you're creating a composite, when you're bringing in elements that didn't exist in your original photo, layering them in and creating something new. But there are so many useful applications for layers that you may not have thought of before. So I'm going to introduce you to a couple of really useful techniques that we can use with our original photo being reintroduced as a new layer, and the way it interacts with the pixels underneath with the blending mode is going to give us some new options for more creativity. So it may sound complicated, but stay with me and I'll explain it fully, and hopefully that'll open up your way of thinking to some new ideas with using layers. So the first thing I'd like to do is enhance this area where it appears that the sunlight is just coming through at the top of the frame here. What I'd like to do is create almost like a light bloom coming through here, and I'm going to do it with a new layer. So I'm just going to come in here, open up our original raw base layer, and it's just going to drop it onto the top of our layer stack. So now we see that original raw file without any processing with 50%. If I push it all the way to 100, you'll see that was our original photo that we started working with. Just below the opacity slider here, we have this box that says normal at the moment, but if we click that, we get access to all these different blending modes. And if I mouse over those, you'll see that it really changes the look of the overall photo depending which blending mode we go for. And you may have noticed that as I went over screen, everything got a bit brighter. We're screening the light, we're brightening it up, so that is the option I'm going to go for. If I drop this all the way back down to 0, you can see what we'd created up until the point we introduced that layer. And now if I push this up, you can see we get this brightening effect. But I don't want that everywhere in my photo. I just want it in that area where I'm going to create this light bloom. So what I'm going to do is create a mask that only reveals it right here. And I could do that with a radial gradient. In fact, that's what I'll do. I'll just click and drag, and I can grab the handles to reshape this so we can make it more elliptical. And now if I come back out of the masking option, you'll see that we've got exactly the opposite of what we want. And that is because our mask is the wrong way round. So all we need to do, if I show this, you'll see that it's revealing this where all of those red pixels are. That's showing me where we will see this layer that we introduced. And currently we want the opposite of that. We want to see the layer introduced just here. So I'm going to invert that mask. And now you can see we're going to get that brightening effect just there. And there we go. So if I hide this layer and then show it, you can see that we get that little subtle pop of light. And if I want to intensify it, what I can do is grab my brush, drop my strength again, and then just start painting in that effect. And there we go, we get just a little bit more light bleed from that effect. So the next thing I think our edit would benefit from is drawing our viewer's eye more in towards this more interesting part of the frame here. I really think that's going to help the aesthetic of the photo. And so what we can do to actually help guide our viewer's eye is darken down the areas we don't want our viewer to look. And if you notice this rock on the left hand side here, that's quite bright. We've also got bright rock on the right hand side here, a very bright and saturated bit of foliage on the right hand side there as well. I'm not worried about the saturation at the moment, but the brightness is certainly an issue that I can take care of. So let me show you another technique by adding that same image back over the top, and this time what I'm going to do is actually darken this down. We have an option just to go for the darken mode there, but that's not what I'm after. Multiply is the one I'd like to go for here. Perhaps not with that sort of level of intensity, but multiply is a great mode for darkening areas down. And of course I don't want to apply this everywhere, I want to do it selectively, and of course that is where our masking comes in again. So I'm just going to go to the mask, choose paint, and I'm happy with my strength at about 1/3. A nice big fat brush, and now I can make some sweeping passes over these areas that I want to darken down. Even the water I can darken down, just sort of give that a level of richness that wasn't there before. And I can even come in and just sort of intensify this crack that's going through there. If we work on a smaller scale with a smaller brush, effectively we are creating a burn, like a dodge and burn effect. But by using the multiply mode and a mask, we just get a little bit more control. So I'm just coming in there, darkening down that bit of foliage. We can do the same at the top if there's little areas that we feel a little bit too bright as well. And then I'm just going to run down the side of the frame there just to make sure that our viewer's eye stays central to where that brighter part was and doesn't just drift off the frame to the side there. And I just put a rogue stroke on there by mistake, so I'm going to press Ctrl Z to undo that. Okay, and if I come over, we can hide this layer, and you can see that previously we had a more uniform brightness over the whole photo, and now if I show that darkening layer, the multiply, we've got a little bit more control about where the brighter area of the photo is. Our viewer goes more to this central part. And now if I press the \/ key on my keyboard, we can see the original photo, and I release to see where we've got to. So here was our before, here's our after. So hopefully you're getting an idea of just how powerful layers can be, even when we're not introducing new elements, but utilizing the original photo just with different blend modes. So now let me show you how we can control and intensify the colors in our photo using a solid color layer with a specific blend mode as well. It's a really nice technique that I have shared before, but people always ask me, where do I get a solid color from? Guys, you can just download them from the internet. Quick Google search on images and you'll find something. But if you are one of my premium channel members, you just click the join button with the downloads option. I do have a folder that contains those, and I will also be putting these files into the folder as well so that you can work along with this and actually try these techniques on this actual photo as well. Right, let me show you that technique. So I'm going to come up to the plus icon here, and you may have seen in the thumbnails before, I just have this kind of pinky red color, which when I click it, it drops the color over the top of the photo. Now, obviously we have the option to stretch that so it goes over the whole photo. That's much more useful. But for now, I'm just going to leave it as it is so you can better see how it's interacting with the photo underneath. So the blend mode that I like to go with for this is overlay. I'm going to push the opacity to 100% so you can see exactly what's going on. The photo is being imbued and injected with this reddy color, but it's not red that we want to be applying. So does that mean we need to find a different color? No, not at all. What we're going to do is actually use Luminar Neo to control this color, to change it. So I'm going to open up the color dialog box here and come down to the HSL section. We can control individual colors, and we do have a red color, so we can control that. However, a much more useful way to deal with this is to come down to the hue shift. That's actually going to allow us to change the whole color itself, so we can take this in a completely different direction. Now, if we push the color more towards a green, you can see how it's really intensifying the foliage. Obviously, I don't want to be applying this everywhere, but you know, we've got a mask. Also, it's far too strong at the moment, so we could bring the saturation of that down if we wanted to. And of course, in the layer properties themselves, we also have the option to reduce the opacity. So none of the effect, all of the effect, and we just need to find that sweet spot. Now, if I decide I'm happy with what it's doing with the greens, also the intensification of the kind of blues in the water, I'll just go fill or stretch, either one. So we're making sure we're covering the whole photo. And now we just need to paint the effect in where we want it. So I'll choose a brush, make sure I'm in paint mode, put my strength to about half this time, and I'll just reduce the brush size so that I can come in and just make a little pass over the greenery and do the same back here. And because our strength is at 53, every time I click and paint, we're just increasing, doubling down on that mask effect. And as I said, I quite liked what it was doing with the water, and so I'm just going to do a quick paint over there. Now if I hide this effect and then show, you can see that we've really enriched all of those greens. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to work or not, but I'm going to try using that technique again, this time to actually add some color to that light bloom that we had coming in from the top of the photo. So I'm thinking warm that area up, give it more of a warm sunlight feel. Let's see if it works. Okay, so I'm going to come over and add a new layer, and again, click on this. And you might think, well, why didn't you just duplicate this layer here? Because you can right click and choose duplicate layer, but the problem with that is it would have duplicated the mask that we'd just painted before as well. We just want a nice fresh layer to work with. Again, we'll choose the stretch option so we fully cover the canvas. And this time, before I've made any changes, I'm just actually going to create my mask. So I'm just going to click and paint. That's one pass, and I'll just go for another pass more centrally so we get a stronger effect right here. If I push the opacity all the way up, you can see the mask that we've created where this kind of reddy color is just showing through. And now we want to change the blending mode. So previously I was going with overlay. So you can see that we'll be able to intensify the color, and we could certainly choose a yellow and do that. However, with that intensification, we're kind of losing that ethereal look. So one option would be to actually use the screen mode and now come down to the color and just change this until we hit that yellowy color that we want. It's actually a little hard to see those changes, so what I'm going to do is temporarily just change this back to normal, jump back into the color here, and I'm going to bring the saturation right up, and I'm also going to brighten this up as well. because if we brighten it and then use the overlay technique, I think we're going to get the best of both worlds. And while it's introducing the color, it's killing the softness that we'd previously created. But the soft light option, that is actually a really nice way to still get color, but with a softer effect. So let's hide that layer to see our before. And now all of a sudden that light is looking very blue, very green. And now show layer, and we've got a much warmer, yellowy sunlight coming through. I do feel like it's a little bit overcooked, so I'm just going to ease that back down to where it looks a little bit more natural. Now I think we could absolutely stop our edit there and say I'm done. However, we've got all these amazing creative tools inside of Luminar Neo that are a lot of fun to play around with, and I want to have a go with them on this image. But there's a problem at the moment, and I hope that 𝗨𝗀𝗲 will rectify this in a future update of Luminar Neo. And that is that currently there's no option to flatten all of those layers onto a single layer. And the issue with that is any of the editing tools that we apply only get applied to the layer that we currently have selected. I now want to apply those tools globally to the whole photo, and it not just to affect a single layer. So there's a workaround for it, but please 𝗨𝗲𝗲, I would love it if you could just implement a flatten layers option. So this is our workaround. Come back to the catalog, right click on the image, we're going to come to export, call it first pass edit, make sure we are in the very high quality TIFF format. We don't want to add any extra sharpening or resizing, but we do want to make sure that we're in a nice rich color space. sRGB, it's not the biggest color space, ProPhoto is the biggest, Adobe RGB is more than adequate though. So that's the option I like to go for, with a bit depth of 16, not 8. And that's it. We're going to hit export, and that's going to create a flattened version of this photo that we can carry on working with globally. And there you go, we've got two identical thumbnails. The only difference is you can see this little icon here shows that this one has been edited. That's what we were just working on before. No icon here indicating this is a brand new file with no editing applied. And so I'm going to double click, jump into the edit section, and I just open up the edits. You can see that currently no tools are applied whatsoever, so we're free to start fresh on this. One thing I'd like to do is darken down any areas, particularly around the edge of the frame, like these little brighter rocks here, that are just catching my eye and drawing my attention away from this lovely waterfall. And the way I like to do that is using the curves tool. I'm just going to grab the bright point and start to bring that down. And now, again, using my masking, I'm able to just brush this in only where I want it. I'm going to keep my strength down again, around 1/3, click, and I can just start painting that down. And any little area that just catches my eye because it's too bright, particularly around the edge of the frame, I can then just use this technique to brush this in and help hold our viewer's attention right in the center of the frame. Let's toggle the eye to see before and after. It's subtle, but it just helps. Because we're now working on a flattened image, we now have the option to use the vignette tool as well. So we can just bring that down, and that'll help to darken those sides a little more as well. A really great thing with Luminar's vignette tool is we can choose the center point of the vignette. So I'm just going to shift that over to the left slightly so I make sure it's over the waterfall. I'm going to crank my amount up just so I can see actually how it's affecting the photo, and then I can perfect how I want this to look. Maybe even brighten the center just slightly, and now bring that amount back down to a point where I feel happy with it. Now, while I do want a nice rich green in this photo, personally I find the greens, particularly on the right hand side here, are oversaturated. So I want to keep a nice saturation in around the waterfall, but I just want to dull these areas down a little bit, particularly this little area here. And so now I'm able to come in, grab my color tool, and as you know, we can desaturate the overall photo saturation. Or what we can do is come into the saturation tab here under HSL, so we can specifically pinpoint only one color at a time. So I can take the saturation out of the greens, but often you'll find the saturation also exists in the yellow as well. So by doing a combination of green and yellow, we can just tame that saturation right back. We can be pretty aggressive with it because, again, we don't need to apply that with 100%. We can use our brush to build the effect up. So just by making subsequent passes, I can just knock back the saturation in those greens, and then just toggling before and after along the way just to see how we're going. And now by desaturating that area, I think we have a more uniform distribution of green. Before, this green area here was just really screaming attention. Look at me, look at me. And now we've just dialed it back, and now all the greens have a greater sense of equilibrium before and after. Now I find a little bit of the orange in the rocks just a little bit distracting as well. So again, I'm going to see whether we can use the color tool just to take care of that. So I'm opening a brand new color tool, and that's going to allow me to create a separate mask that's going to deal only to these rocks, whereas previously I was talking into the greens. Now we're going to come in and just see if we can control the rock color. And already you can see that that's neutralized the rocks, but it's also affecting the rest of the photo, the foliage at the top where we've got that nice warm sunshine coming through. I don't want to affect that, and that's why I'm going to come in again with a mask, click and paint out from that area, and we'll do the same over here as well. Okay, let's have a toggle of before and after. Nice. I find the pattern and roughness of the water at the bottom of the photo just a little bit conflicting with the nice softness that we have of the waterfall here. And so what I'm going to do is just grab the structure and take that into a negative amount and just see whether that's actually helping to soften that up, which it is. Obviously it's far too much and I've completely destroyed all the detail, but again, what I'd like to do is paint that in. Where has my mask gone? Sometimes I've noticed that the masking tool disappears for structure. I'm not sure why, but if you jump into the edit section itself, it reappears. So we still can mask it in, but that's just something to note, that you just sometimes need to hop out of the tool section and into the edit section to actually access that mask. And I'm just going to go for brush and paint it in with 50% and have a little look at before and after. Before and after, we've still got all the pattern there, it's just softened it off slightly. And if there are areas that are particularly catching our attention, like this little bit here, the white bit here, what we can do is actually use the clone tool just to take care of those. Now I'm just going to speed this part of the video up because I have done a complete tutorial all about the clone tool before, but I'm just going around cleaning up or minimizing elements in my frame that I find are visually distracting. If we look at the before and after the cloning, subtle little changes, but they really help to make a big difference to your photo before and after. Okay, and as a final touch, let's go for one of my favorite tools, Mystical. You know I love this one, guys. So I'll grab the amount slider, push that all the way to 100 so you can see the effect. Look at that soft, ethereal, dreamlike quality that gives. I really like that, but obviously 100's way too much. But I'm going to leave it there for now just so you can see the difference that the smoothness slider has. Look, as I drop that down, everything gets that sort of crunchy quality to it. Push it all the way up, again enhancing a dreamlike soft quality. So I'm going to push my smoothness higher, and now I'm happy with the look. Just bring the amount back down, I don't know, somewhere around 30. Before, after, before and after, maybe just a little bit too much, bring it back down again, before and after. And I think it's over softening the water, but I do like the effect around the edges. So again, it's a case of coming in, grabbing the mask, and this time I'm just going to go for the erase option, around 50%, and just erase the effect from the water, the white part of the water. There we go. So we still get some of that mystical effect, but not so much that it's ruining the water. Okay, before we do our final before and after, let's just have a look. This is where we came from in our TIFF edit to here. So before and after, a little bit of cloning, a little bit of desaturation, before and after. But let's do my favorite thing, jump right back to the beginning. Here is our original raw file, and here is where we've got to. Our original unprocessed raw and our Luminar Neo edit. Very in-depth edit, this one, but I really think it's been worth it. So today this was quite a different approach to editing, utilizing layers, particularly layers of the same image, just with different blend modes. I'd love to know what you thought about those techniques. Is that something that you've played around with before? Are you going to start playing around with it? Let me know in the comments below. And I'd like to thank 𝗨𝘀𝗲𝗄, who make Luminar Neo, for actually making this video possible. They sponsored me and actually helped me get out to this waterfall so that I could share this process with you guys. So thank you, 𝗨𝘀𝗲𝗄. If you guys like the look of Luminar Neo and you don't have it yet, check out a link in the description below. I've also got a discount code that you're welcome to as well. And if you want to join the channel as a member supporting me, man, that really does help me out because it takes a lot to put these videos together. You can click the join button. I have a supporters option, a members option. They're like the equivalent of about a cup of coffee a month. Really just helps me to keep making these videos. But if you want to go all in, there's members plus downloads, and as my way of saying thank you so much for that level of support, I give you access to these photos, other photos to go along with other tutorials and other resources as well. So if you'd like to do that, click the join button and then just send me an email to anthonyeditsyourphotos@gmail.com with your email address so I can add you for access to those photos. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye for now.